Hello and welcome to God's Influence on America's History. Today we're talking about the gag rule. Some of you may be familiar with that term from court cases where if there's an active court case, a judge may put out an injunction to both parties saying neither one of you is allowed to go out and talk in the press about this. Why? Because the case needs to be adjudicated, and if publicity one way or the other might influence a jury in the outcome of a case, he can establish a gag order. But gag orders go back a whole lot further back in time than that. John Quincy Adams, who was our 6th president of the United States, son of the 2nd president, John Adams, served as president of the United States and then went to the House of Representatives, where he served for another 17 years as a member of the House of Representatives from Massachusetts. During the first part of the 1800s, you had a nation that was engaged in allowing slavery to exist, certainly in the southern states. John Quincy Adams was very much opposed to slavery. Some of you may know from having seen the movie Amistad, which is a true story, that John Quincy Adams represented a group of slaves in a very famous court case before the U.S. government that allowed those people to go free and be returned back to the coast of Africa, where unfortunately their village had already been burned down and their homes destroyed, but they were freed and allowed to go back home. John Quincy Adams was the lawyer for the slaves. He very much opposed slavery, and he made it a habit when he returned to the House of Representatives after having served as president to regularly introduce bills to abolish slavery. And because he was so vociferous about it, there was enough pro-slavery voices in the Congress at that point in the nation's history to where they issued a gag order. John Quincy Adams' response to the order that was passed by the House of Representatives, one of those House rules, the date was May the 25th, 1836. Am I gagged or not? The Constitution does guarantee people the right to petition the government for the redress of grievances. What was really going on January 6th in Washington, there was a rally where people were trying to get the government to do its job, to redress the grievances that they felt that the election had not been conducted properly. Others got involved, it got out of hand, crimes were committed, but the purpose of the rally was to pray and petition the government for redress of grievances. That was the initial purpose. 19th century America, which would be the 1800s, Americans very regularly exercised their right. Let me just read to you this little short 2-paragraph statement that I just looked up online. Very easy to do, from the archives of the U.S. government. The Constitution guarantees citizens the right to petition the government for redress of grievances. 19th century Americans exercised this right vigorously. Each session, Congress received petitions respectfully but earnestly praying for action. In 1834, the American Anti-Slavery Society began an anti-slavery petition drive. Over the next few years, the number of petitions sent to Congress increased sharply. From 1837 to 1838, for example, abolitionists sent more than 130,000 petitions to Congress asking for the abolition of slavery in Washington, D.C. As anti-slavery opponents became more insistent, Southern members of Congress were increasingly adamant in their defense of slavery. In May of 1836, the House passed a resolution that automatically tabled or postponed action on all petitions related to slavery without even hearing them. Sound familiar? They just decided they just weren't going to hear the case at all. Didn't care about the merits, just weren't going to entertain it at all. Stricter versions of this gag rule passed in succeeding Congresses. At first, only a small group of congressmen, led by then Representative and former President John Quincy Adams of Massachusetts, opposed the gag order rule. Representative Adams used a variety of parliamentary tactics to try to read slavery petitions onto the floor of the House. But each and every time, he fell victim to the rule. Gradually, as anti-slavery settlement in the North grew, the more northern congressmen began supporting Adams' argument that whatever your own view on slavery, stifling the right to petition was wrong. In 1844, the House rescinded the gag rule on a motion made by John Quincy Adams, not long before his own death. Adams was making it a point to mentor a small group of younger members of the Congress. There was one person that he mentored while he was in the House of Representatives. Adams died. He actually died on the floor of the U.S. House while he was trying to represent his district in Massachusetts. But one young man that he had mentored and brought into the anti-slavery camp, Adams wouldn't live to see it. That young man would be in Congress for a little while, then he would go back home to his state, and ultimately he would become the 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln was the president who led the United States during the Civil War. Lincoln was the one who issued the Emancipation Proclamation. He was heavily influenced by an older leader who had come before him, John Quincy Adams. But the House, for much of his existence, because the Constitution specifies that the two houses of Congress, the House and the Senate, can set up their own rules for how to operate within their parliamentary procedure. And sometimes people try to use the rule book to slam down opposition. But yet the people have a right to redress for grievance. It took a while for the idea that slavery was wrong to become the majority opinion. But John Quincy Adams kept fighting. He didn't live to see the final victory, but someone that he helped train up in the right way, Abraham Lincoln, saw it through. It was difficult. The nation went to war, but ultimately, right prevailed. One of the most precious freedoms we have is the freedom to respectfully and earnestly pray and petition our national leaders to address grievances. See you next week.